And here we go.
Peter B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Friday, September 8th, 2017. And if you're looking at Facebook right now, we're giving you the live feed from the secret studio. This is part 2. The first episode is our interview with Dan Kovalik, the author of The Plot to Scapegoat Russia. And I wasn't able to capture that first time. Hopefully I'll be able to get the audio off Facebook and post that as a podcast as well. Well, Mother Earth is angry. We know about Harvey. We know about Irma. And the House of Representatives today, despite the anger of 90 Republican members, passed a $15.25 billion disaster aid package that will help at least prime the pump for relief for Texas, the Gulf Coast, and also for Florida, and who knows how much of an impact Irma is going to have over the next few days. But those 90 Republicans are really pissed at Trump, and that's really good news because, for a guy like me, I'm not a Democrat, but I don't support the Republicans or their policies. And to see their infighting escalate to this point is extremely rewarding, I have to say. But we're not alone in the ravages of extreme weather events and natural disasters. You may know that Mexico, the southern part along the Pacific coast, was hit near midnight California time last night with a massive 8.2. That's a major seismic event on the Richter scale. The latest report I have is at least 32 people have been killed, and the death toll will certainly likely grow much bigger. And in South Asia, the flooding continues, caused by monsoons in areas of Pakistan. Bangladesh was the scene in recent weeks. More than 2,000 people have died in South Asia due to massive monsoons over the past couple of weeks. By the way, if you're watching on Facebook, please do me a favor and share with your network of Facebook friends, and we'll try to build more viewership here on this second episode that I'm doing today. We're starting to get some analysis of the true damage and the residual damage in the Houston area. More than 40 different locations released hazardous pollutants in the run-up to and the impact of Hurricane Harvey. At least 14 toxic waste sites were flooded or damaged. Nearly 100 spills of hazardous substances have been reported. And this against the backdrop of the very limited regulation by the state of Texas of petrochemicals, of all kinds of chemicals, the refineries, both pollutants of water and air. And if you think back just a couple of years to that massive explosion that obliterated the town of West Texas, which is not actually in West Texas, because the fertilizer plant there blew up. And they only had $1 million in liability insurance. And even after that, Texas has not tightened up its regulations. And people in the Lone Star State are going to pay a price for that. And it will continue long after the cameras have left the Houston area. Interesting to note that the woman who was in charge of the EPA after 9/11 and who told the first responders at the World Trade Center that they had nothing to worry about, well, that's Christine Todd Whitman, former governor of New Jersey and George W. Bush's first director of the EPA. And despite her sketchy track record, she's now schooling her successor by a few, and that is Scott Pruitt, the former Attorney General of Oklahoma, who was plucked by Trump to run the EPA. And in an op-ed at the New York Times today, Whitman takes some heavy swipes at Scott Pruitt. She says, as a Republican appointed by Bush to run the agency, I can hardly be written off as part of the liberal resistance to the new administration. But the evidence is abundant of the dangerous political turn of an agency that is supposed to be guided by science. And that's Chloe, my studio dog, piping up. I'm recording this podcast while an air conditioning technician is trying to restore air conditioning to the secret studio here, so there may be a little bit of background noise. Anyway, this piece by Whitman is notable, and I'll also mention that one of my other in-depth interview podcasts this week is with the Nation magazine's ace Washington-based reporter John Nichols, and his new book is called The Horsemen of the Trumpocalypse, and he profiles all of the members of the Trump wrecking crew who are on duty in Washington right now. And he points out that while the media focuses obsessively on Trump and his tweets and his distractions and Jared and Ivanka, that these people are doing a whole lot of damage. And it really behooves us to become aware of who they are and what they're doing. So I recommend the interview with John Nichols. It's available for my subscribers today at peterbcollins.com. Well, you may have heard me talking about Rush Limbaugh. You know, I was once the unlucky guy who had to follow his program every day on KNBR in San Francisco. It was an unusual situation. Anyway, I've met the man. I know him a little bit. And I was listening this week as he recklessly tried to undermine the weather forecasts and, in particular, the predictive maps projecting the path of Hurricane Irma. And as part of his denial of climate change, he believes that hurricane coverage is just an advertisement for climate change. So he railed about that all week long. And then yesterday at the end of his program, he said, I guess I got to leave. He, of course, lives in a mansion in Palm Beach, not too far from the coast, that is expected to get hammered by Hurricane Irma. And let's see what he said. He said, I may as well announce this, but I'm not going to get into details because of the security nature of things. But it turns out we will not be able to do the program here, that's from his home base in Palm Beach, tomorrow. So the other funny thing was I tuned into Sean Hannity's show last night, expecting to hear him whining and complaining about Trump selling out the Republicans, either that or sucking it up and praising Trump for being presidential and, solving a set of issues. But it was very clear. Sean only wanted to talk about Hurricane Irma. He did not want to piss on his master, the comb-over in the White House. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is based here in San Francisco. It was once the most liberal appeals court in the chain. That's certainly no longer the case. But it nevertheless upheld the ruling of a federal judge in Hawaii. And it rejected parts of Trump's travel ban that was revised and reissued on March the 6th. And that, of course, banned people from 6 Muslim nations from coming to the United States. And it put a 120-day blanket ban on any refugees being admitted to the United States. So the court overruled both of those sections, and it's unclear what this means because the Supreme Court will hear arguments on the travel ban on October the 10th and is expected to rule before the end of the year. But the edicts, the royal decrees from the Donald that were issued, the revised ones on March 6th, have expired. The Muslim travel ban was 90 days. The refugee ban was 120 days. So I think that we may never get an honest ruling on the validity of these orders because the Supreme Court will be able to duck setting any precedents by saying, never mind. Those orders have expired and, it's back to business as usual. And, of course, the threat to our nation from these groups of people entering our country, I think was, infinitesimal at the beginning, and it's even lower now. But I guess it fed the Trump, the fearmongers who, and the recipients of fearmongering who are, really persuaded by that kind of antics. I mentioned during the live interview with Dan Kovalik, and if you've only found this video on Facebook, look at Peter B. Collins, the Peter B. Collins page, and you should see the video interview I did with Dan Kovalik that we fed on Facebook here on Friday afternoon. And during the phone call that came in from Todd, I talked about Robert Perry's newest report, which is entitled A New Hole in Syria-Sarin Certainty. And this relates to the claims that the Syrian military was responsible for an alleged chemical incident on April 4th of this year that led to Trump launching cruise missiles on April 7th at an airport in Syria. Yesterday, I reported with some skepticism and reluctance that the UN commission that investigated this has charged that Syria is responsible. But I've linked to Bob Perry's story, and I encourage you to read every word of it, because the UN report is far from unequivocal, and the U.S. media is just flatly treating it as fact. And what you'll discover if you read Bob Perry's piece is that the UN Commission report brushes aside the discovery that no warplanes took off in time to fly to the town of gosh, I'm having trouble with Khan Shikoun, that's what it is, pardon me. There are also serious defects in the report because the account relies almost exclusively on eyewitnesses in the town, which was under control of al-Qaeda's Nusra Front at that time. And Perry also goes into the history of previous alleged chemical incidents that were laid at the feet of Syria, but later investigations showed that these were staged by one of the various rebel groups in the civil war, this ongoing conflict in Syria. So I encourage you to read this because it really blows big holes in the UN report, and it adds shame to the limited coverage of the report in the U.S. media, which has simply taken the executive summary and not asked any further questions. Perry also invokes an expert who I have high regard for. That's Ted Postal, the retired professor of physics at MIT, who examined the New York Times reporting on the Khan Shikoun incident, says that the location of the bombing strikes doesn't match up with the supposed damage that the Times claimed to have detected from satellite photos. And Postal is also the one who debunked the claim that John Kerry made when he said, we know that Syria did the sarin gas attack that occurred in the Damascus suburb of Ghouta in August of 2013. So again, I encourage you to be skeptical, get multiple sources, and don't rely exclusively on corporate media reporting. Every day I like to pause for a second and thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. And some of them are watching on video right now. I see Billy Cook, Carl Howard, John LaFrancois, and let me add a couple more here from recent payments to the Peter B. Collins Podcast. People like Cheryl Fleming, Dick Atlee, I know he lives in Maine, Billy Cook, yeah, there's Billy, and Mark Brodsky. And I also want to thank our friend Joe Carson, who kicked in an extra $50 to help me with the studio equipment upgrade that is underway here at the Peter B. Collins studio. And if you would like to become a subscriber, I'd love that. Come on over to my website, peterbcollins.com. You click on the menu button from any device, any browser, and pull it down, then click on Become a Subscriber. It takes you to the sign-up page, and you've got choices about what level of support you're comfortable with. Janet Napolitano is the president now of the University of California at Berkeley, right across the bay from me. Actually, she's the president of the entire UC system. Her office is near the Berkeley campus. And she was previously the director of Homeland Security. To be fair, she presided over the deportation of up to 1 million or more individuals while she was heading Homeland Security and its subset, ICE. But she's coming out swinging against Trump's effort to kill DACA. Because, after all, Janet Napolitano is the one who signed the policy into effect on June 15th of 2012. And she is suing to protect the so-called Dreamers, some of whom are students at the University of California, and certainly, fall under her concern. What's interesting is, in the lawsuit filed today, Napolitano argues that by rescinding her memo, even with the 6-month delay in implementation, Trump and his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, violated rules under the Administrative Procedure Act, which requires the government to provide public notice and seek comment from affected parties before revoking a significant policy. So this could be another hurdle that will anger Trump and get in the way of his authoritarian rule. But it may protect the dreamers for longer than we can anticipate right now. The other story that Napolitano has injected herself into is the announcement yesterday by billionaire Betsy DeVos, who bought her position as Trump's Secretary of Education. And she has announced that she is going to review the rules related to campus sexual assault that were put into effect under the Obama administration. And this is a really slippery slope, because DeVos is arguing that the effort to punish perpetrators has gone too far, and that some innocent people, mostly males, are being accused of sexual assault, and the evidence is not necessarily there to support it. Now, I do acknowledge that there may be a handful of cases where the alleged perpetrator is not properly protected and his rights are not properly represented in legal proceedings. But the bottom line for me is that Betsy DeVos seems to want to make campuses safe for sexual predators again. And that is drawing a strong comment from Napolitano. She said the Trump administration aims to undo 6 years' worth of federal enforcement designed to strengthen sexual violence protections on college campuses. She said that her system, the University of California, remains firmly committed to protecting its students and staff from sexual violence and sexual harassment while ensuring a fair process for all involved. And there are still many women who have come forward and whose allegations have not been properly adjudicated. So, on balance, while I do acknowledge that there may be some cases, and this will upset some people, but I'm going to say it anyway, Brock Turner, the swimmer at Stanford, who was convicted of sexual assault, is being described inaccurately by many people as a rapist. And maybe this is too technical for you, but Brock Turner is not alleged to have achieved any kind of sexual penetration with his victim. I'm not saying that makes him innocent. I'm saying that we have to be careful, because there are different levels of crime. There are different levels of gravity of a crime category. And when we lump them all together and decide that sexual harassment is the same as a vicious and brutal rape, well, we undermine the rule of law and the ability to treat each case individually. Despite saying that, I don't yield any ground to Betsy DeVos. I think that this whole effort is a sham. Good news for single-payer advocates. Bernie Sanders is about to introduce his Medicare for All bill. The first co-sponsor is California's fresh senator, Kamala Harris. And the second senator who has agreed to join forces with Sanders is Massachusetts' Elizabeth Warren. Now, I welcome Elizabeth Warren's support for single-payer. It would have been really nice if she'd had the courage to support Bernie Sanders during the primary last year, if only on health care issues alone. We've got another rogue law enforcement agency built into our government. It's the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. And there is an operation in Bristles, Virginia, that in an effort to create a sting operation to entrap people who evaded taxes on tobacco products, well, they set up their own tobacco distribution company. And they hired a guy named Jason Carpenter to move up there from Alabama, where he was a small-time tobacco distributor. He opened a warehouse, and they have made so much money fleecing and trying to entrap people who violate the tax laws related to tobacco that it's become a huge slush fund. And if you need if you work for the government, you're in law enforcement, and you need a credit card to buy some stuff for an investigation, you're supposed to contact Bristol. You need a flashy BMW for your undercover operation, or $6 million to pay an informant. Those are all actual cases that have come out of this shop in Bristol, Virginia. It looks like every last one of us is the victim of a major hack, and so far, Russia is not being blamed for this one. It's Equifax, one of the three major consumer credit reporting agencies. They're based in Atlanta. Their current estimate is that the files on 143 million Americans have been grabbed by hackers. I guess we're all exposed now. Over in Israel, we're watching the corruption trial of Bibi Netanyahu and the separate proceedings against his wife, who is accused of misusing the state treasury of Israel to pay for fancy parties and catering at the presidential residence, or the prime minister's residence, to be more accurate. And the case is closing in on her. The attorney general, whose name is Avichai Mandelblit, was appointed by Benjamin Netanyahu, and he has examined the evidence, and he said that he is moving forward to charge Sarah Netanyahu. She gets one last chance, which appears to be unusual, to present her side of the case at an indictment hearing. But it appears she will be charged, and one of the complaining witnesses is a former chief caretaker who previously said that Sarah Netanyahu is often drunk, consuming up to 3 bottles of champagne a day. Wow, that's a heavy habit. Well, I've got to prepare you that next Tuesday, Hillary Clinton's book, What Happened, is going to drop. It's not going to drop like a rapper's CD. It's going to drop like a ton of bricks. And it will further divide the already divided Democratic Party. The latest leaks from Hillary's book, she regrets that she didn't come out fighting against James Comey after he exonerated her on July 6th of last year. Wow, that would have been a mistake. And what's fascinating for me is that my own congressman, who's a decent guy, his name is Jared Huffman, but it's a Democratic guy. He was a super delegate. And when I've interviewed him on our local TV show here, I pressed him on why he remained loyal to Hillary and voted for her at the Democratic convention when it was clear that she was damaged goods, that she had no room to grow her support, and that she could likely lose to Trump. And Huffman has said, I don't want to play the blame game. I don't want to go back and, rehash all that stuff. But he's quoted by The Guardian. Actually, he was quoted by Politico, that was quoted in The Guardian, that Clinton is publishing her book maybe at the worst possible time, as we are fighting some of the most high-stakes policy and institutional battles we may ever see, at a time when we're trying to bring the party together so we can all move the party forward stronger together. She's got every right to tell her story, says Huffman. Who am I to say she shouldn't, or how she should tell it? But it is difficult for some of us, even like myself who've supported her, to play out all these media cycles about the blame game and the excuses. Now, Hillary does say that she takes full responsibility. Quote, I go back over my own shortcomings and the mistakes we made. I take responsibility for all of them. You can blame the data, blame the message, blame anything you want, but I was the candidate. It was my campaign. Those were my decisions. Well, it would have been a short book if she just left it there. But it turns out she is going to embark on a 4-month book tour. Ouch. We're going to have to listen to this rehash for 4 months? And I'll say it right here, right now. She blames Bernie Sanders for denying her the White House. She blames Bernie Sanders for damaging her and damaging the Democratic Party. Bernie Sanders isn't perfect. He's flawed on foreign policy. There are a lot of issues that I have some differences with Sanders on. But Bernie Sanders tried to rescue the Democratic Party from the Clintons. And any claim that his motives were otherwise, is self-serving bullshit. Oh, and there is a new media startup. It's called Verrit, with 2 R's and 1 T, Verrit. Veritas is the Latin word for truth. In fact, that's what's used by James O'Keefe to run his propaganda shop. Anyway, Peter Dow, D-A-O-U, who is a Clinton loyalist and some kind of billionaire, I don't remember where he got his money, he has started Verrit, and I haven't had a chance to look at it, but based on the news accounts, it's like Drudge for Hillary lovers. And The Guardian wrote a piece that really trashes it. He says, conservative media like Fox and Breitbart don't succeed because they lie. They succeed because they push an ideological agenda. Their message may be flexible with facts, but is consistent in its overarching vision. And that's what's missing on the left. And after experiencing the failed effort to launch liberal media under Air America back in 2005, I have to say that that analysis strikes me as quite accurate. And finally, we end with a guy who is even more odious and disliked than Hillary Clinton among Bernie Sanders supporters. And that would be the pharma bro Martin Shkreli. You know, he was convicted of fraud back about a month ago. He is out on $5 million bail. He faces up to 20 years in prison. He's appealing his conviction. And meanwhile, he is dangling a $5,000 reward for any individual hair that somebody can grab from Hillary Clinton's, I hope from her head, that's what I would infer here, and send to him. And after he does a DNA test to make sure it's really her hair, he will send the person $5,000. Now, I'm not really sure what he's up to, but here's a tweet that he put out. The Clinton Foundation is willing to kill to protect its secrets. So, on HRC's book tour, try to grab a hair from her. I must confirm the sequences I have. Will pay $5,000 per hair obtained from Hillary Clinton. Payment after the sequence matches. Now, I don't know what he plans to do with this. His attack on the Clinton Foundation may have some merit. There's a dirty swamp there that hasn't been drained. But beyond that, I can't explain what he's up to. If you're watching on Facebook and you want to call with a comment or a question, do it right now at 415-455-0102, 415-455-0102. One more item before I go. One of my pet bands these days is called The National. They just released a new album today, and they'll be coming to the Bay Area. I've got tickets for their concert in October. I really like this band, and the Wall Street Journal published a review of the new album earlier this week, and today the New York Times, on its homepage, is featuring a virtual reality video behind the scenes with The National. So if you've never heard of these guys, I just want to recommend that whatever music service you use, whether it might be Spotify or Apple Music or any other, look up The National. You can find free videos of theirs, their music, on YouTube. But they really have a great sound. They're smart. They're very clever in the music that they write, great performers, and the lead singer, Matt, has a hell of a voice. So that's my tip for you for this long weekend. And if you're hunkered down in the face of Hurricane Irma, you'll be on my mind. I wish you all the best. Thanks for joining me for my news and comment podcast and the live video feed on Facebook. I remain Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling.